On Parliament's first day back, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson went on the offensive.
This Parliament must either stand aside and let this government get Brexit done, or bring a vote of confidence and finally face the day of reckoning with the voters.
How Downing Street wants to get Brexit done is still uncertain. The EU's Brexit negotiator says the bloc hasn't received any proposals from the UK.
We are still ready to work on any new legal and operational proposal with the UK.
Johnson says he's confident a deal can be done before the EU summit on October the 17th. But some EU lawmakers doubt Johnson's motives.
Maybe his strategy is another one, and I believe it has been all along, is to provoke no-deal Brexit, but in a way that would allow him to blame others, so either Brussels or Westminster.
A leaked government report has warned a hard Brexit would cause food, fuel, and medicines shortages. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn says he'd much rather have another delay and leave the matter up to voters.
Quite simply, for the good of this country, he should go. Mr. Speaker, he says he wants a general election. I want a general election. It's very simple. If you want an election, if he wants an election, get an extension and let's have an election.
If he's able to unseat Johnson, Corbyn has promised to get voter approval for any deal he strikes with the EU. And an option to cancel Brexit would also be on the ballot. Paolo Montesilio, TRT World.
Well, for more, let's go to Andrew Watt in Dusseldorf. He's the head of the European Economic Policy Unit at the Hans Bockler Foundation. Welcome back to Money Talks, Andrew. Now, as UK MPs fight amongst themselves in Parliament, many in the EU are likely watching those proceedings in disbelief. What is Europe's assessment of this latest chapter in the Brexit saga, do you think?
Well, good evening. I am afraid to say that I think they're slowly despairing of any hope of reaching a deal with the Johnson government. I was in fact in Brussels yesterday already. During the day, officials I spoke to were rather depressed about the scope for an agreement, and you've shown the scenes now from the British Parliament and the very tough stance that the government and other spokespersons of the government have taken in the debate in the British Parliament. To get a deal, Johnson needs to win over some Labour oppositional MPs, and the way he's acting in Parliament, showing no contrition at all, aggressive language, is hardly likely to bring them over to his side. And of course, the EU is seeing that. The EU realizes that means that it's very unlikely that any deal will be accepted by the British Parliament. And so, of course, they're unwilling to go out on a limb and make concessions.
Now, the EU's Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, says Britain has yet to provide legal and operational proposals that could break the Brexit impasse. Presumably that's referring to this, I guess, unicorn alternative to the Irish backstop that's currently in the deal. Do you think Boris Johnson is serious about wanting a deal with the EU?
Well, you're right that the Irish backstop is the major sticking point, but of course there are other problems that need to be resolved as well. And indeed, the EU has been waiting for a long time for concrete proposals. Negotiations have been going on in the background, and there's been a lot of speculation about how serious they are being pursued by the UK side. I think my assessment is that things have changed over time. I think initially Johnson didn't really have an interest in a deal. He wanted to keep his own Brexiteer MPs on side. Then he realized that wasn't really going to go anywhere because the Parliament has essentially blocked the UK leaving without a deal. So then he shifted and was more serious about negotiations. But now, having the Parliament being suspended, I think he's switched tack again. I mean, it's very hard to see now how in such a short space of time, for the reasons I said just before, a deal is possible. And he seems to be going all out to provoke the opposition into calling an election. But again, as you've shown, Mr. Corbyn, the opposition leader, has been very clear that they're not going to do that.
Yes, let's talk about this prospect of another election. Jeremy Corbyn says he'll be open to one if he reaches out to the EU for a delay to Brexit. Is the EU confident that a general election in the UK will solve this Brexit impasse?
Well, let me put it like this. I think there is no solution without an election, but that doesn't necessarily mean that an election will bring a solution. I mean, what we've seen is not just Jeremy Corbyn, but also the other opposition parties are very united. And I think that's what the government, what Mr. Johnson has underestimated in the way he's approached things, how united the opposition parties would be on this issue. And they're waiting now. They're quite rigorous in their opposition to an election until Mr. Johnson goes and asks for an extension. If he were to do that, then the EU would grant an extension, but it would mean a big loss of face for Mr. Johnson, who's continuously said he wants to leave the EU at the end of October. It would drive some of his supporters to the Brexit party, and he would, in all likelihood, then lose the election. But in the end, whether it's still not very clear. You know, we have a first-past-the-post system in the UK. When you have a lot of parties competing in each constituency, very small shifts in opinion can lead to big changes in the MPs in the mix of MPs who are elected to the next parliament. And so it's very hard to predict what the outcome of the election would be, which is why I say that we need to have an election to have a chance of a resolution. But even if we do have an election, it's still not clear whether that would be enough to clear the ground and to reach a solution.
So even if Boris Johnson, I guess, succumbs to this idea of requesting for a delay to Brexit, do you actually think the EU will approve one?
Oh, I'm sure they would do that, yes. Whoever asks for an extension, whoever credibly asks for an extension, will get it, provided they agree to having an election in the intervening period. But again, that's actually not the debate anymore. If there is an extension, there will, I think, definitely be an election, and the EU will certainly grant that.
Okay, Andrew Watt, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you for your analysis as always.